The ghost man stumbled into the dusty main street of Saint-Roche, his boots torn, his shirt stained with more than sweat. People froze. Children hid behind barrels, and the old sheriff's hand twitched toward his revolver. Everyone knew this man wasn't meant to be alive. His name was Éloi Marenne, a rider once buried under desert sand and betrayal. Yet here he stood, his pale eyes hollow like a grave, his face burnt by the sun, moving as if each step was borrowed from death itself. He lived every day like it was his last, because maybe it truly was. The air held a silence too heavy for the hour. A single crow broke it with a cry, circling above like it smelled endings. Éloi's breath came sharp, his voice cracking like dry wood. "You left me for dead," he whispered, his words sliding across the crowd until they landed on one man leaning against the saloon's post. That man was Lucien Duret, once Éloi's blood brother in arms. Lucien's smirk faltered. He spat, but his jaw clenched. "Ghosts don't talk," he said, though his hand trembled against his gun. The people of Saint-Roche didn't understand the whole story yet, but they felt the weight of something about to break. A man returned from death. A brother turned enemy. Dust swirling like it carried secrets. And the ghost man standing there, ready to bleed the truth from whoever dared deny it. The sun bore down like judgment itself, and in that moment the town knew someone would not live to see another day. Before the betrayal, before the grave of sand, Éloi Marenne and Lucien Duret were brothers not by blood, but by something deeper. They rode together across the barren plains of Côte Sèche, where the wind carried whispers of bandits and the sun peeled skin from bone. Éloi was the quiet one, a thinker with a scar across his cheek from a knife fight he never spoke about. Lucien was fire, loud laughter, quick temper, and a charm that made strangers hand him trust they shouldn't. They were outlaws, yes, but not cruel. They took only from those who had plenty and gave enough back to the starving miners and widows to be remembered as legends. At least that's how it began. One night, under the lantern glow of an abandoned chapel, Lucien laid out a map. His finger pressed hard on a red X where the town of Saint-Roche slept. "One job," he promised. "One last job and we'll never have to beg in the desert again." Éloi studied him, uneasy. Saint-Roche wasn't rich, he was desperate like them. But Lucien's eyes burned with greed. "There's gold passing through," he insisted. "Guarded by men too tired to notice. It's ours for the taking." Éloi said nothing, but inside, something heavy twisted. That night, they made their oath with whiskey and dust. They'd ride together, share whatever blood spilled, and leave the desert behind for good. But promises in the Wild West are as fragile as glass in a storm. Éloi didn't know it then, but Lucien had already chosen gold over brotherhood. Betrayal was already written into the sand, waiting to be uncovered when dawn came. The dawn of the Saint-Roche heist came with skies the color of ash. Éloi adjusted his saddle straps, every motion slow, steady. Lucien, on the other hand, was electric, grinning, slapping his horse, already humming a tune like the gold was already his. They rode with two others, Gérard Lenoir, a sharpshooter with eyes colder than river stone, and Marius Vian, a boy too young to shave, too eager to prove himself. They looked like brothers in arms, but Éloi felt a crack running through them, invisible but sharp enough to cut. When the stagecoach came rattling over the ridge, its wheels carving scars into the earth, the four men swooped down like wolves. Gunfire split the morning, horses screamed, and dust clouded everything into chaos. Éloi's revolver barked once, twice, dropping the guards. Gérard's bullets whistled, tearing through wood and flesh. Marius cheered, firing wildly. In less than a minute it was over. The coach lay on its side, the guards still, the driver crawling away, whimpering prayers. Lucien kicked him down with a smile. "We earned this," he spat. They cracked the coach open and saw it, crates stacked with shining bars of gold. Even in the dim light, the glow felt holy. Lucien's laugh rose, raw and wild. He grabbed a bar, kissed it, then looked at Éloi with eyes that no longer belonged to a brother. "We don't split this," Lucien said quietly. "This is mine." Éloi's chest tightened. At that moment, he realized he was no longer looking at family. He was staring at a man who would bury him alive to keep what wasn't his. The silence between them grew heavier than any bullet. Éloi tightened his grip on his revolver, not pointing it, but ready. He didn't yet know when the betrayal would fall, only that it was already in motion. Night fell heavy over the desert, the kind of night where the stars felt close enough to touch but cold enough to freeze a man's soul. They had hidden the gold in a canyon cave, planning to divide it at dawn. At least that's what Éloi thought. As the fire crackled, Marius slept against his saddle, and Gérard polished his rifle in silence. Lucien leaned toward Éloi, his grin flickering like the flames. "You don't trust me," he whispered. Éloi didn't answer. He didn't have to silence confession enough. When the fire died low, Eloi's eyelids grew heavy. That's when the strike came. A sharp blow to the back of his skull sent him crashing into the dirt. The last thing he saw was Lucien's face, lit orange by the firelight, eyes burning with greed. "Sorry, brother," Lucien said, voice soft like a prayer. "But one of us has to disappear." Darkness swallowed everything. Éloi woke to suffocating silence. His arms were bound, his mouth filled with dust. He was buried chest deep in desert sand, the moon staring down like a cruel witness. Every breath felt thinner, every movement a fight. Lucien stood over him, boots planted firm, Marius and Gerard watching from behind. The boy's face was pale, uncertain, but Lucien's was calm, steady. He tossed a canteen of water into the distance, just out of Eloi's reach. "If the sun doesn't kill you, the coyotes will," Lucien said. "But don't worry, you'll fade quickly." Éloi screamed against the ropes, his voice shredded by the wind. The sand bit into his skin, the stars blurred. Betrayed by his brother, abandoned in the wasteland, he tasted death in every breath. But somewhere in that burning silence, a vow formed in his chest. If he lived, if he crawled back from this grave, he would return. And Lucien would see that ghosts don't forgive. The desert wanted him dead. Heat boiled the sand by day, cold sliced his bones by night. Coyotes circled, their glowing eyes waiting for him to stop moving. But Éloi refused. With wrists rubbed raw, he gnawed at the ropes until his teeth bled. Each movement was painful. Each breath scraped like fire in his chest. By dawn, his arms came free, but his body was weak, half buried. He clawed upward, nails splitting, skin tearing, until he rose from the grave like something reborn. He stumbled into the dunes, chasing the canteen Lucien had tossed aside. A cruel joke. His throat burned dry, tongue swelling, but rage carried him forward. For 3 days he wandered. Buzzards circled, his skin blistered, lips cracked to blood. Once he collapsed under a dead mesquite tree, sure it was the end. Yet something inside him, something stronger than flesh, pushed him to rise. He was no longer Éloi the outlaw. He was a man stripped bare, carved into something that belonged to the desert itself. On the 4th night, half-conscious, he found an old mission ruin. Its well held with just enough water to keep him alive. There, in the broken shadows of saints with missing faces, he swore aloud, "I will walk this earth until I take back what was mine. Until Lucien sees me again. Every day until then will be my last, and I'll live it like fire." His voice echoed off the stone like a curse. Word travels faster than bullets in the Wild West. By the time Éloi Marenne stumbled back into the land of men, whispers already carried his name. They called him Le Revenant, the one who returned. Some swore he had been seen walking alone through sandstorms that swallowed whole caravans. Others claimed bullets passed through him like smoke. Nobody knew the truth, but everyone felt the chill when his shadow crossed their door. Éloi rode into the mining town of La Vigne 2 months after his escape. His clothes were tattered, his skin leathered by the sun, but his eyes no longer looked human. The saloon doors creaked as he entered, silence falling like a curtain. He asked for whiskey, voice rasping, and the barkeep's hands shook as he poured. Men leaned close, whispering, "That's him. The ghost man. Buried alive but walking still." Éloi didn't deny it. He let the story grow. Fear was a weapon and he needed it. Every night, he slept with one hand on his revolver. Every morning he asked the same question, "Where's Lucien Duret?" Some spat, some lied, some crossed themselves. But slowly a trail formed. Lucien was gathering power in Saint-Roche, gold buying loyalty, whiskey buying silence. Gerard stayed at his side, and Marius, the boy Éloi once saw as a brother, was said to ride with them. Underneath Eloi's calm, something burned hotter each day. He had been left for dead, stripped of trust, remade by fire and sand. Now every step was a step closer to Saint-Roche, closer to the man who had once called him brother. And each town he passed left with one haunting memory, the ghost rider who spoke few words, but carried death in his eyes. The trail led him through canyons where echoes carried secrets and into a valley where cattlemen drank under broken lanterns. It was there Éloi finally met the first of Lucien's men. 3 riders with coats too fine for their grit, laughing loud, carrying gold they hadn't earned. Their leader, a brute named Salvat, boasted about the fortune of Saint-Roche to anyone within earshot. Éloi stepped out of the shadows, dust rising around his boots like smoke from a grave. The laughter stopped. Salvat squinted, uneasy. "You look like a man who's already dead," he sneered, though his voice cracked at the edges. Eloi's reply was calm, almost kind. I am. His hand moved quicker than thought. A single shot cut through the night, the bullet striking Salvat's revolver clean from his grip. The crowd gasped, and in that silence, Éloi's voice carried, "Tell Lucien I'm coming." Panic spread. One man fled, another dropped his gun entirely. Salvat, clutching his trembling hand, spat curses but backed away. No one dared draw on the ghost man again. They saw it in his eyes. This was no outlaw chasing gold. This was a revenant dragging justice behind him like chains. By dawn, the whole valley buzzed with the tale. Some claimed he never touched his gun. Others swore he disappeared into smoke after the shot. But one truth spread faster than rumor. Lucien Duret's ghost had returned, and the reckoning had begun. In Saint-Roche, the saloon glowed like a church of sin. Gold stacked in crates behind locked doors, whiskey spilling like water, and Lucien Duret at the center, laughing too loud, dressed in a black coat trimmed with silver buttons. Around him sat Gerard Lenore, silent as stone, and Marius Vian, his boyish face harder now, eyes shadowed by guilt. He never spoke. They were feasting when a rider stormed in, gasping, "Lucien, he's back. The ghost man. Éloi walks." Lucien froze, his smile cracking just enough to show fear. Then he slammed his glass down, shattering it. "Ghosts don't walk," he barked. But his hand twitched at the scar on his neck, the one Éloi had once saved him from in battle. Gerard leaned close, his voice like gravel. "If he's alive, he won't stop. He'll come here." Marius said nothing. His eyes darted to the floor, shame pulling his shoulders down. Lucien stood, his grin forced back into place. "Then we'll be ready. Saint-Roche belongs to me. And if Éloi wants to drag himself here, we'll bury him properly, this time so deep even the devil won't find him." The room cheered, but the sound rang hollow. Everyone in Saint-Roche knew one truth: gold could buy fear, but not courage. That night, Lucien doubled the guards, armed every drunk with rifles, and spread word that no stranger was to cross the town without being watched. But deep in the back of his mind, he heard Éloi's voice, calm, steady, unbreakable. And for the first time in years, Lucien Duret felt hunted. The road to Saint-Roche stretched endless, each mile heavy with memories Éloi wished he could bury. At night, under the same stars that had once witnessed their oath, he heard Lucien's laughter echo in his mind, the laughter of a brother, not a traitor. He remembered the nights they shared bread with miners too poor to buy candles, the times Lucien pulled him out of gunfights with a grin. Those memories cut sharper than any blade, because they reminded him of what had been lost. As Éloi rode, the desert played tricks. He saw Lucien's shadow in the dunes, heard Marius calling him brother, and even felt Gerard's steady gaze on his back. But each vision ended with the same truth: they had left him to die. Whatever bond once lived between them had been burned away by greed. The gold had killed it, and the desert had buried it. What walked now was not forgiveness, it was reckoning. One night, by a dying fire, Éloi whispered to himself, "I do not want to kill him." The words hung in the cold air. Yet even as he spoke, his hand caressed the grip of his revolver, as though it already knew the outcome his heart refused to name. To kill Lucien was to kill the last piece of the brother he once loved. To spare him was to betray the ghost he had become. Closer he drew, each town warning him of tightened guards, of Saint-Roche bristling like a beast in its den. Farmers locked their doors, saloon girls whispered of bounty hunters, and mothers prayed for the storm to pass. But Éloi was not a storm. He was the silence before it, the hush that makes men tremble because they know thunder is coming. Saint-Roche had changed since Éloi last saw it. What was once a tired settlement of hungry miners now glimmered with false wealth. Gold had poured through its veins, buying lanterns that burned all night, music that never stopped, and guards posted at every corner. Yet beneath the glow, Éloi saw the same hunger, the same cracked faces of men and women who had sold their silence to Lucien Duret. The town was rich, but its soul was starved. Éloi rode in at dusk, the sun bleeding red across the horizon. His horse's hooves struck the earth like drums of war, each step echoing down empty alleys. Windows slammed shut. Curtains shifted. Children were dragged indoors. No one spoke his name aloud, but the silence told him they knew. The ghost man had come home. At the edge of the saloon, 2 guards blocked his path. One trembled, the other puffed his chest with false courage. "You're not welcome here," the bold one said, hand twitching toward his pistol. Éloi's voice was steady, his gaze unblinking. "I'm not here to welcome you. I'm here for Lucien." The guard faltered, sweat dripping, until finally he stepped aside. The other one muttered, "God help us all." Inside, the saloon roared with music and laughter, forced, brittle, desperate. Éloi stood in the doorway, a shadow cutting through the light. His presence spread faster than fire. Instruments stopped, dice froze in mid-roll, glasses hovered halfway to lips. Every eye turned to him, and in the silence that followed, it felt like Saint-Roche itself held its breath, waiting for the first shot. From the corner of the saloon, a figure rose. Taller now, leaner, but with eyes Éloi remembered the boy who once shared bread with him under starlight, who once called him brother. Marius Vine. His hands trembled around his glass as he stepped forward, the whole room watching. Éloi, he whispered, the name breaking from his lips like a confession. His face was pale, older but not hardened enough to hide the shame. The silence cut sharp between them. For a heartbeat, Éloi almost saw the boy again, eager and bright. But that boy had stayed by Lucien's side while Éloi was buried alive. Eloi's voice was low, steady as a hanging rope. Why Marius? His question held no rage, only sorrow. That made it heavier. Marius swallowed hard, his jaw shaking. I was afraid. Lucien said you'd never make it. He said, his words trailed off, choked by guilt. The room seemed to close in, every breath shallow, every ear straining for the answer that never came. Éloi stepped closer, boots echoing. Marius flinched but didn't run. Tears glimmered in his eyes. I wanted to go back, he whispered, barely audible. But Gerard held a gun to my head. I was a coward. His voice broke, and for the first time, Éloi saw not a traitor but a child chained by fear. The crowd waited for the gun to fire, for blood to paint the floor. Instead, Éloi placed a hand on Marius's trembling shoulder. Fear buries men deeper than sand, he said. But you still breathe. Decide now who you are. Then he turned, leaving the boy's heart beating louder than the silence. And in that silence, Saint-Roche knew Lucien's reckoning was one step closer. Night blanketed Saint-Roche when Gerard Lenoir finally stepped out to meet him. The town square was empty, shutters locked, lanterns snuffed. Only the creak of the windmill turned in the darkness, squealing like a warning. Éloi stood waiting, revolver low at his side, steady as the desert itself. Gerard emerged from the shadows, rifle in hand, his face unreadable as always. You should have stayed in your grave, Gerard said, his voice calm, almost respectful. The desert gave you mercy once. You won't find it here. He lifted his rifle, the barrel glinting in the moonlight. There was no fear in his eyes, only duty, cold and unshaken. This was the man who had pressed the sand around Eloi's chest, who had looked down at him like a coffin lid closing. Eloi's breath slowed. You buried me, Gerard, he said softly. But you forgot one thing. Ghosts don't need air. He moved first, faster than the eye could follow. Gerard fired, the bullet grazing Eloi's coat, but Eloi's revolver barked back with thunder. Sparks lit the square. Gerard staggered, dropping his rifle, blood seeping through his vest. Still he didn't fall. He looked Éloi in the eye, lips curling faintly. I knew you'd come. Then he collapsed into the dust. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder, heavy and final. From the shadows, unseen faces watched the townsfolk, too afraid to breathe until the shot was done. Now they knew, the ghost man wasn't just a rumor. He was judgmental. And Lucien's circle was breaking, piece by piece. Éloi holstered his revolver, the night swallowing the sound. Only one name remained on his tongue, heavy as stone. Lucien. Saint-Roche no longer buzzed with laughter. Its streets felt like a graveyard waiting to be filled. Lucien had turned the saloon into a fortress, rifles stacked against the windows, men posted on rooftops, every candle burning through the night as if light itself could hold back the ghost. Yet no amount of gold could buy away the fear that clung to every corner. Lucien sat at a table lined with maps and whiskey bottles, his silver-buttoned coat wrinkled from sleepless nights. His eyes darted like a hunted animal's. Gerard was gone, and whispers of Marius speaking with Éloi spread through the ranks. Trust bled out of the gang faster than whiskey from a cracked barrel. For the first time, Lucien's voice shook when he shouted orders. He's just a man, he insisted. One man can bleed, one man can die. But deep inside he knew Éloi was no longer just a man. Marius lingered near the door, his face pale, torn between fear and guilt. He remembered Eloi's hand on his shoulder, the words that haunted him. Decide now who you are. The boy's heart hammered against his chest as he watched Lucien rant and rage, realizing the brother he had once admired had become a tyrant bound by greed. Outside, the town itself waited, silent and heavy. People barred their windows, whispered prayers, and clutched their children tight. They knew the desert had brought something back that could not be stopped. Somewhere out there, Éloi moved closer, each step measured, each breath steady. The air smelled of rain, though no clouds touched the sky, only the promise of a storm that would end in blood. And in the hush before dawn, Saint-Roche held its breath, knowing judgment was only hours away. Dawn painted Saint-Roche in blood-red light. The streets lay empty, doors barred, windows shuttered. Only the echo of boots broke the silence. Éloi boots, steady and slow, each step like a drumbeat of judgment. He walked straight down the main street, coat flapping in the morning wind, revolver at his side. From the saloon fortress, rifles shifted nervously, men whispering. But none fired. They had heard the stories. They had seen Gerard fall. No gold could buy them enough courage to be the first to test the ghost. The saloon doors burst open. Lucien Duret strode out, dressed sharp in his silver-buttoned coat, eyes burning with defiance. Yet his hand twitched against his revolver, a tremor he couldn't hide. "Éloi," he called, his voice loud, cracking. "I should have buried you deeper." The town held its breath as the two men faced each other, brothers once, enemies now, both carrying years of broken oaths. Éloi's voice was calm, steady, colder than the desert wind. "You had your chance, Lucien. You chose gold over blood." Lucien laughed, sharp and hollow. "Blood never filled a man's belly. Gold did. And gold still will." His eyes narrowed, teeth bared. "You're no ghost. You're just flesh waiting to be torn apart." Their hands hovered near their guns. Time slowed. The world shrank to two men, one promise, one betrayal. Then, like lightning splitting the sky, both drew. Shots cracked, dust exploded. Lucien staggered, clutching his chest, blood blooming across his fine coat. Éloi's shoulder burned from a grazing shot, but he stood tall, revolver steady. Lucien dropped to his knees, his eyes wide with disbelief. You should have stayed dead," he gasped, blood choking his words. Éloi knelt before him, their eyes meeting one last time. "I tried," Éloi whispered. "But death wouldn't take me, not until I looked you in the eye." Lucien's breath rattled once, twice, then silence. The last brother fell into the dust, and with him, Saint-Roche's false crown. The ghost man stood, smoke curling from his revolver, dawn light cutting across his scarred face. For the first time the town exhaled. Judgment had come. Saint-Roche awoke to silence. No gunfire. No shouts. Just the whisper of wind through the empty streets and the steady creak of a saloon sign swinging in the morning light. Townsfolk emerged slowly, faces pale, eyes wide, until they saw it. Lucien Duret lying dead in the dust, his silver-buttoned coat stained with blood. And standing over him, the ghost man, revolver at his side, chest rising with the calm of a man who had nothing left to fear. No one cheered. No one clapped. They simply stared because they knew they weren't watching a hero, they were watching something older, something carved out of the desert itself. Éloi scanned the faces and his gaze found Marius. The boy stood frozen near the saloon, shame heavy in his eyes. Éloi walked to him, slow and steady, until they were a breath apart. He pressed Lucien's revolver into Marius's shaking hands. "This is the weight of choice," he said softly. "Don't ever let fear bury you again." The townsfolk whispered, some crossing themselves, others bowing their heads. But Éloi didn't stay to hear their prayers. He turned from Saint-Roche, his boots stirring the dust, his shadow stretching long in the rising sun. He had not come for glory, nor to rule, nor to stay. He had come for justice, and justice had been done. At the edge of town he paused. The desert stretched wide and endless before him, the same desert that had nearly claimed him, the same desert that had given him back as something more. He knew he would keep walking town to town, never settling, never resting. A man living each day as if it were his last, because for him, it always was. And as the sun climbed higher, Éloi Marenne disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind only whispers. Some called him an outlaw. Some called him a ghost. But to those who saw him that day in Saint-Roche, he would forever be the man who lived every day like his last, the ghost man.